So again, thank you all for joining us. We've got more people that RSVP'd, but we're going to go ahead and start so that everyone else can get on with their life. Can someone not in the room with me in the chat box just let me know if you can hear us? Yep. Okay. Thank you. Yay. It's always weird. We can't see you guys. Do you want their cameras on if people are available, or do you want to just talk to the screen?
It's up to them if they
okay.
want to turn it on or not. I don't mind. I mean, nicer for me to see faces, but I'm okay if they want to turn it off.
Okay. So I don't know how much you can hear through my headphones of Maha speaking over there, but if you don't mind having your cameras on, that would be great, just because sometimes, I don't know if you've ever led a webinar, but when you're just talking to the screen and you have no idea if people are alive or listening, it's kind of very disorienting. So, yay, thank you, Gemma. Hello. We have volunteers. So, so today, Maha is going, those of you that are from the first cohort of LOREX met Maha in San Juan. She has been here in the ASLO office working with me for almost exactly 3 months now, working with some of you on a coral reef paper, learning about all things ASLO, and just generally having a good productive time. So, but one of the great things about Maha, if you haven't spent time with her, is she truly is a global citizen. Like, to me, she's the epitome of a well-traveled scientist who is aware of, cultural differences and has navigated this like from the get-go in her career, which you'll hear about soon. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoy her presentation. I don't know how you want to handle questions. Should people interrupt or just type in the... Okay.
During the conversation, then I'll try to address it during.
Okay.
Otherwise, at the end, I'll address questions.
Okay. So yeah, so you can use the chat box for questions either during the seminar or at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Maha.
Hi everyone. So like Adrian said, my name is Maha, and thanks for coming to my webinar on becoming a global citizen. I'm just going to briefly tell you a little bit about my travel and background. So hold on. There we go. So I'm originally from Brazil, but I grew up in Germany, in Berlin, and I moved to the UK to do my bachelor's and master's in marine biology. And then after that, I moved to Saudi Arabia, and I just recently completed my PhD also in marine biology and focused on climate change impacts on coral reefs. And I did that at KAUST. And I just recently finished, and shortly afterwards, I moved to DC, and I started my fellowship at ASLO, looking at science, communication, and policy work. And throughout my years of studying, I've taken part in numerous projects abroad, including the Bahamas, the Bermuda, the Canary Islands, and France. And so I've had this very culturally diverse upbringing, but I've also just gotten around a lot, and I love to travel. So I've gotten, quite a bit of time in other places. And when I was in Saudi Arabia, people started coming up with this term to me, "You're such a global citizen." I really didn't understand what that meant. I was just, doing something that I enjoy and working globally and internationally. And I didn't understand how being a global citizen had anything to do with my research. And I really didn't consider myself a global citizen at all. And so hearing that term more often, I decided to actually look into it. And what does it mean to be a global citizen? And also, how does that reflect into me being a scientist? So if we look at a definition of a global citizen, I think everyone can see that there. I think that's maybe better. Yeah. If we look at the definition of a global citizen, there's not really like a very concrete definition, but the general idea of it is that a global citizen identifies with people, understands the wider world and their role in it, and then takes this understanding to tackle important issues. So really being a global citizen seems to be more like a mindset than a concrete thing. But if we look at it in more detail, we can notice three main things here. Global citizens identify with people, they understand the wider world and their role in it, and they tackle important issues. I kind of felt like I didn't understand how this related to me. I always saw my collaborative work abroad just kind of my work. And so I started to try to decipher all these different parts a little bit more. And arguably, you can say as a scientist, you are tackling important issues. Your research is answering important issues, right? But how does identifying with people or like your role in society have anything to do with you being a scientist and a global citizen? So I wanted to dissect these things a little bit further. And I started reflecting on my experiences abroad. And the first thing I really noticed was that what it brought me was cultural awareness. And culture is something that I think we often underestimate how much of it we have and how much it influences our interactions with other people. I remember my first night in the UK, I was 18 years old. I just moved away from home to a city or Southampton I've never been to. And I was just starting my degree. I was pretty lost. And I moved into this apartment with 6 other British people. And they instantly hit it off. And they had all these, common ideas and views. They had inside jokes, like British jokes, and they had pop culture and the Queen. These are all things I had absolutely no relation to and no connection to. So often we underestimate how much culture does really influence how much we feel belonging and connection to people. So culture is a lot of things if we think about it. We have language, social interactions, and values, which are really obvious, but also things like food and drinks, music, and humor. Everyone thinks Germans don't have a sense of humor. They do. It's just really hard to understand and maybe a little bit special. But if we focus on the big one here, which is probably language, there's a couple of things that obviously if you've traveled a lot, you'll have experienced this and you'll have noticed that language could be quite the barrier. And English is an international language, so you're quite lucky because you'll mostly find people that you'll work with, especially if you go to a professional setting. But when I say people might be shy, what I mean is that people might speak English, but they don't feel that comfortable speaking English to you because they may not be as fluent. So trying to not engage too much with you in conversation might just simply be because they don't feel confident expressing themselves in English. And that's not something you should take personal or be offended by, because that's simply not their first language and you are the native speaker, and that can be quite intimidating for people. The other thing is that you are in a different country likely, and then there is a different language. And when that's the case, assuming that everyone will speak English is probably not the best way to go about it. We're very fortunate that many people do have English being taught to them, but not everybody is as fortunate as that. And there's many people who have very basic English skills and will simply not engage in these kind of conversations in English. So when you're in a social setting and everyone around you is speaking a different language, don't take it personally if there's no change into English just because you're present. Also remember that you're kind of new to what is their everyday life. So if people have a different language, they're going to continue in that language that feels natural to them on their everyday. And just because you entered the room, it doesn't necessarily make them instantly switch into English. The other big one is social interactions. I think that's really important because even if you have the same language and everybody understands you and you understand them, there can be huge differences in how things go in terms of interacting with people. I think how to greet each other is probably a very common example that you'll have probably experienced some awkward encounters in. But as an example, I'm from Brazil, we kiss twice. But in Germany, we shake hands. My Colombian friends, they give me one kiss. And in Saudi Arabia, you get as many kisses as are appropriate to your social status and connection. So I've had countless awkward greeting kiss moments where I'm just waiting for another kiss or I drag someone in for another one. It happens. And it's just something to be aware of. And if, you feel maybe that was rude of you or them, take it easy. You know, everyone kind of understands that things go different in different places. But if you observe, you'll start to understand what works and what doesn't. And I think personal space is another one of the big ones I'd say I've definitely noticed. You know, different cultures have different, let's say, touching and closeness behavior. And so what you think might be rude or inappropriate might just simply be a different culture. So I think these are the two really big ones that can kind of give you a bit of a shock if you go to very different cultural environments. But I think the main thing here is that you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. And I don't mean this like ask for help, like of directions, but I mean, if you don't understand something, if you don't understand a certain interaction, if you don't know if you should shake hands or give 2 kisses, just ask somebody and clarify if that makes you feel more comfortable and more secure in your setting. And also, if you're going to be introduced to a new social environment, everyone's speaking a different language, you're welcome to ask, oh, what are you guys saying? Or what are you guys laughing about? I'm not saying every single time someone's going to translate every single sentence, but it does show people that you're trying to integrate and you're trying to be part of the conversation. And that goes a long way anywhere you go. And I think lastly, for Americans, I would like to say, you guys have a very welcoming culture where you like to interact with people and you like to make them feel welcome, and you interact with strangers a lot. And I know a lot of Americans go to Europe and they come back saying Europeans are so rude. Nobody is like welcoming and kind. It's not that we're rude. It's just that we have a little bit less of this embrace a stranger culture, and we're a little bit more to ourselves. We're very polite. We have a lot of rules on politeness, but none of it is about going that extra mile to interact with a stranger. And that can often come off as rude or standoffish. It's not. It's just a little bit different. So keep that in mind as well. So I think the main word that probably covers all of these cultural differences, though, is respect. You're going to a new place and you're going to learn so much about how people think and feel and interact and view the world. You don't have to agree with all of it, by no means, but you have to be able to respect that and learn and try to understand where they're coming from. And you might think, okay, but this is just my social environment. What does it have to do with my research? But the truth is that when you are going abroad and throughout your entire scientific career, you should and you will be dependent on collaboration and working together with people. And so cultural awareness and respecting people's views on things is incredibly important and does help you create better collaborative efforts with people from all over the place. So this is very you-based, but obviously you're also going to this new lab and this is your professional life in a way. And so the question is really, how does being a global citizen then reflect into your professional life or make you a better professional in general? And I have some advice for that because there are some tricky bits that come with visiting a different lab. So for starters, it's really important to just figure out the people that you're working with. Who is who? Who's the postdoc? Who's a PhD? Who's a lab technician? Who is the center secretary? Just understanding who are the people in certain positions that you're going to attend on or maybe need to contact. And then who is your contact, right? Who's your contact for field work? Who's your contact for getting access to the lab? Who's your direct contact on like everyday basis? These are small things that you should understand from the get-go. It's going to make everything smoother. Orientating yourself in your new lab environment is incredibly helpful, or in your new field environment, because at one point people are very quickly going to kind of drop the constant support and kind of depend on the fact that you probably should know where everything is. And that's, again, not coming from a mean place, but it's simply that for them it's every day. And when you know something very well, it's very hard to realize that maybe someone else doesn't know where to find certain things. So be sure you figure that out as well. And keep track of your progress. When you go abroad, this is entirely basically a self-motivated thing. You're going to have to really put your own motivation and your own self-directed effort into getting stuff done. And so going in, knowing what it is you want to achieve, keeping track of that progress, and being aware that you have to get certain things done by certain deadlines helps you actually push and make the most out of your time when you're abroad, and also ensure that you're more likely to complete the experiments, because as we all know, it never works out the way we want to, and you're probably going to have to repeat stuff or figure out emergency ways to fix it. So keeping track of that progress is really good for yourself. And taking notes. When you have meetings, which you're going to have a lot, you're going to talk to a lot of people, just to figure out all of the above points, write it down. Write down meetings, decisions made, anything, because you're going to have so many new things to deal with that in that moment you think, oh yeah, that's obvious. But 3 or 4 hours later or 2 days later, you're going to have forgotten what the decisions were made or the comments that were made. So taking notes is just really your own support for yourself. Again, it's like keeping track of your progress. It's really for you just to have a very clear overview of what's going on. And the last one is patience. This one's huge because you come from a certain lab environment and a certain culture where certain things might go really fast and really easy, and other things might be slower. And so other labs might have the same things that are quick to you, usually maybe slower, and then other things that go really fast. There's just different speeds of working and different working culture, different work-life balance, and you need to respect that. That is how it goes somewhere else. So patience here is not just patience with other people, but it's also patience with yourself, understanding that you might be rushing things or you might be going slower on things than people are in the new lab. When I was working in France, the French don't work on the weekend at all. And so they don't even answer emails. So I went to the lab on the weekend and I tried to work because I wanted to catch up on my experiment. So I went on a Saturday and I couldn't get in the lab. I was locked out. And so I was like, well, how do I get in now? So I called the postdoc and I called the lab technician and no one would answer. And after I storm called the PI that was hosting me, he eventually answered. And I explained my situation to him and he said, we don't work on the weekends. No one's coming in to help you. See you on Monday. And that was the end of the conversation. And that was it. If I didn't get my work done Monday to Friday, that was what I was going to do. So it's these small things that help you make the best of your time there if you're aware of them. So with all of these concepts and ideas that we have, like if we go back to the definition of a global citizen, how does that have anything to do with us being scientists, all the things we talked about, right? How does that make us global citizens or make us better scientists in the end? So identifying with people, when we look at the cultural awareness, it's about learning about people and their cultures and understanding where they're coming from, right? And this is what makes us good at collaborating and also communicating with people. The other 2 points here, as scientists, I believe that we're our position is kind of at the forefront of knowledge, right? We're the ones asking questions, developing new ones, and gathering the understanding to solve or create answers to questions. And so this is kind of our role, let's say, but tackling the issue is not just answering these questions, but it's actually communicating in the back. And no matter how much you're into science communication or not, the fact is, as a scientist, you are a communicator by default. The number one purpose of your research is to communicate it to the people. You're doing this through primary research papers or through conference presentations, or maybe you're even more involved. You're doing teaching, blogs, outreach, podcasts, whatever it is. But in essence, all of these things are your way of communicating your research. And if we look at what it means to go working abroad, that we have to connect with people and we have to understand, we have to orientate ourselves in a new environment. All of this helps to feed into how we communicate with people and how we transfer information back to people. So I'm going to take this definition apart a little bit differently. Your understanding of science and societies is what makes you actually identify with people. And being able to identify and understand the people that you're working with, or not even maybe that you've traveled far, but just from different communities around you or social classes, understanding and identifying with them makes you able to have them listen to you because they're connected. And when you connect with people, you're able to transform information into a way that they can understand. And this communication and this amount of connection with people is how you tackle your global issues, through education, through that communication. So in essence, being a global citizen does make you a better scientist because it makes you able to connect and collaborate much better with people. I want to give you a really basic example that you can consider at your next Christmas dinner. You know your family better than anybody. You know their values, their views, their perspectives, what they like, what they don't like. So when somebody asks you and your family what it is you do in your research or what you're going to do on your LOREX exchange, you know exactly how to present and give that information to a family member in a way that they're going to understand and care about. And it's going to be very different than you would give it to your colleagues. And the reason you're able to do that is because you've spent enough time seeing their perspective of things and understanding how they view things, that you're able to take this information and disseminate it in a way that makes them care. And this is essentially what it means to be a global citizen then. And this is why we become better communicators and scientists through it. But finally, I think going abroad and traveling and doing all these experiences, they foster something really important, which is tolerance. And at the end of the day, just always practicing tolerance is how we're going to overcome many more issues that we have in this world. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have any. And yeah, that's it for me. I can't see the chat window.
Hit the chat bubble on the black screen.
Yeah. I'm happy to also, if you guys have any questions when you're going abroad or anything with the labs, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. But essentially it is the best thing to go work abroad. It's great. And I'm sure if you've done your LOREX exchange, you know what I'm talking about. It's just good fun. So we have Elia. I don't have very much experience with the cross seas, but I have heard that sometimes people don't want to help. What would be your suggestion on how to deal with that situation? Yeah, it can be sometimes difficult to have people commit to helping you. I did say that it is a lot of you having to push for it, but there should be people there to help you. When there isn't, when the point of contact you've been giving isn't actually being helpful, you need to give it a bit of time and try a bit. When that doesn't work out, you're going to have to go to either the superior or somebody else. I would say first go to somebody else. So if you've been assigned a PhD student that isn't being helpful or collaborative, you can go to the postdoc. If you've been given a postdoc, ask another postdoc. The final level in the end would be to, of course, contact your advisor back home, let him know about your situation, because if that is debilitating your progress with your research, you need to let your advisor at home know as well what the situation is. And they often can then get in touch also with the advisors locally and let them know what's going on. But that is a case-on-case basis. But basically, I would say work your way slowly up. But also, don't just do it because one time they didn't help you, right? Be sure that you've actually tried to communicate and have people understand that you are actually in need of help. You're welcome. And do you want me to answer your question, Adrian?
Sure. Which is more asking for them.
Oh, Ben has a question. I'm curious how different the writing process is with international collaborators. I think the thing is not so much just your international collaborators, it's how big your group is and what has been done by whom. I have a lot of collaborators in Australia, and when we write a paper, we decide straight up who has what part to do. The thing about international collaborators is you can't really go to someone's office and be like, hey, did you write your section? So you're kind of dependent on email communication, and there is a point at which you can't really keep harassing them. It can get difficult, but most of the time, most people are very aware of what their parts are. And I think as long as you enter the publication being aware and deciding and allocating spots, who has done what, therefore they have to write their part. That's the main way to delegate the work, and then follow up on that, and being aware that everyone has to do their part. I've had very little bad experience with international collaborators not doing their part in this. So push comes to shove, you do have to follow up, and eventually probably your PI will have to step in. But honestly, that's very rare that has happened. Does that answer your question? Okay. So Adrian has one last question. Students online, did anyone experience what I referenced about non-native speakers seeming a bit shy or hesitant to talk? Yeah, has anyone of you who's traveled noticed that people might be shy or not talking to you very much? I'm happy for you to unmute yourselves and talk. No, everyone has had super social environments. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I was in, this is Sarah. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Well, not good.
No. I was just going to reiterate that it wasn't generally that much of a problem. And I was in Sweden, in Obisco, and...
Are you typing something? Okay.
For one thing, pretty much everybody I met knew English, so that wasn't...
So people from Umeå apparently might have some stories about people being hesitant to talk to you.
Or just in general what the culture was like.
Or what the culture was like, anything like that you'd like to share?
Sarah. All right. If they want to talk, then talk.
Huh?
Was Sarah talking?
I don't know. I didn't hear anything.
Do you have your speaker on?
Yeah.
You can hear?
Was Sarah speaking? Sorry, because we couldn't hear. Oh, sorry. We couldn't hear that. Did you hear it?
But I have my thing off.
Yeah.
That's what we get for trying to limit feedback. I think we didn't hear. Sorry.
Sorry. Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't really... Okay. She's saying she didn't have so much problems because most people she ran into spoke English. Carrie Ann said, I found that to be true more in less developed countries than European ones. True, but maybe you haven't been to France. Okay, that's good. I mean, if most of your experiences have been with people actually interacting with you, that's great. But yeah, I think in your work environment in general, you'll find less of that a problem. But if you do go out of the general academia lab life and you're trying to interact with people locally, you might come across more of that. But that's great. I'm glad no one has had these encounters. I'm hoping no one will. It's better when people can talk to you and interact with you. But I think we're good, right? Thank you guys so much for coming and for asking questions. Sarah, I'm really sorry we couldn't hear you. I'm not sure what happened. But I hope this gave you some ideas and some tips on your global citizenship in the future and how that can just make you a better scientist. And I'm happy to answer any more questions if you have any over email. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.